It was a quiet evening in a small town on the outskirts of California, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees was louder than anything else. James, an ambitious young man in his mid-30s, had just returned from a successful career in the city. 4 years he'd worked his way up the corporate ladder, always chasing the next promotion, the next milestone, and never once stopping to think about what he truly wanted. He was now back in the quiet of his hometown, away from the hustle and bustle, hoping to find the peace that had eluded him for so long. But what he didn't realize was that silence, in its purest form, would come to teach him far more than any corporate strategy could. James was the type of person who lived for constant noise, the hum of his office, the clatter of meetings, the rush of city life. He thought that without this noise, without the constant rush, there was no purpose, no progress. But as he settled into his childhood home once again, he found himself facing something he had never experienced before: the absolute silence of the rural countryside. It wasn't just the absence of sound, but the kind of stillness that made you feel your own presence, your thoughts, your fears, and most of all, the weight of your own choices. At first, he tried to fill the silence. He turned on the television, cranked up the music, even went for long drives to keep the noise around him. But every time he returned to his home, the silence would still be there, staring him down as if daring him to face it. One night, after another failed attempt to drown out the quiet, James decided to take a walk around the town. He had nothing to do, nowhere to be. It wasn't even about the exercise, it was more about escaping the suffocating feeling of being alone with his thoughts. As he wandered the empty streets, something strange began to happen. But as James continued walking, a man appeared on the corner, sitting on an old wooden bench, just gazing at the night sky. His face was weathered, his clothes simple, yet there was a calmness to him, a quiet that seemed to match the surroundings. James couldn't help but be drawn to him. It was as if this man, with his unassuming presence, was somehow an answer to all the questions he had been asking himself. Without a word, James took a seat beside him, both of them sitting in the silence. The man turned to him and said something simple but profound. "Sometimes the answers you're searching for are hidden in the silence, if you're willing to listen." That moment marked a turning point in James's life. For the first time, he understood that silence wasn't something to be feared or avoided. It was a space for reflection, a space for growth, and a space to hear things that had been drowned out by the noise of everyday life. The distractions of work, the constant rush to achieve, were ways to keep him from facing his own silence, and the discomfort that came with it. The silence didn't just allow him to hear his thoughts, it gave him the space to process and evaluate everything he had ignored for so long. During one of these reflective sessions, he remembered his father, an old, wise man who had always spoken about the importance of balance in life. He would often say, "Chase what you love and everything else will follow." At the time, James dismissed those words. After all, in his mind, success was about ambition, about climbing the corporate ladder, about winning. One day, James found himself standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the vast, rolling hills below. The silence was overwhelming, yet beautiful. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, letting the stillness wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. There was no rush, no pressure to be anyone other than who he was. The silence had given him the clarity to understand that his pursuit of success had often been at the expense of his inner peace. And now he was ready to make a change. He was driven by a desire to live authentically, to prioritize what truly mattered: his health, his relationships, and his sense of inner peace. He chose to work in a role that allowed him to be creative and compassionate, far removed from the high-stress corporate world he had left behind. The silence had taught him something profound: that true progress wasn't always about doing more, about pushing harder, or chasing external validation. So why does this story matter? It's because in our busy, fast-paced world, we often forget the power of silence. We are constantly surrounded by noise, distractions, and demands, and we've come to associate silence with discomfort, with emptiness. But in truth, silence is a gift. It's a space where we can tune into ourselves, where we can hear our own thoughts, process our emotions, and understand our deeper desires. The modern world pushes us to be constantly on, always working, always striving for the next achievement. But the truth is, the pursuit of success without pause often leads to burnout, to feeling lost or disconnected. It's easy to lose sight of who you really are when you're constantly moving at 1,000 miles an hour. Silence, on the other hand, offers a counterbalance. It allows us to step out of the chaos of everyday life and into a space of self-awareness, where we can tune into our true needs and desires. If you feel lost or overwhelmed by life, perhaps it's time to embrace the silence. Step away from the noise. Take time to listen not just to the world around you but to the world within you. What is it that you truly want? What are the things you've been too busy to notice? Silence can be uncomfortable, yes. It can force us to confront our fears, regrets, and uncertainties. But it is in that discomfort that we grow. It is in that silence that we find the space to become more than we were before. The silence isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. It's in those quiet moments that the answers we need often reveal themselves. And don't be afraid of taking time for yourself. You don't have to keep rushing or constantly be in motion. There's nothing wrong with slowing down, reflecting, and even stepping away from the noise of the world. In fact, it can be one of the most powerful decisions you make. If you want to grow, to evolve, to understand who you really are, you must first be willing to sit in that silence to make peace with it. Because it is only in the quiet that we can truly hear what we need to hear and begin our journey to becoming the best version of ourselves. It's important to recognize that silence doesn't mean inaction. It's not about being passive or giving up. In fact, silence often brings us closer to the clarity we need to take meaningful action. It's in the quiet moments of reflection that we can see the path ahead of us, unobstructed by distractions or external pressure. So, next time you find yourself overwhelmed, take a step back. Embrace the silence. Let it guide you. It may just be the key to unlocking a new chapter in your life, one filled with purpose, clarity, and peace. In the end, the true power of silence lies in its ability to help us reconnect with our authentic selves. It's the space where we can shed the noise of the world and hear the wisdom that lies within us. And when we learn to embrace that silence, we discover that we are not only capable of achieving more, we are also capable of living more meaningfully.